What did your mother say that made your jaw drop? Mary Stuart. My mother lived in a time when women kept their place. She took care of the house and the family and rarely even expressed an opinion. As a result, I'm sorry to say that we all took her for granted. One day, when my sister and I were in our teens, the three of us were listening to a call-in song request show on the radio, and my sister started to change the station. My mother said, "Don't change the station." My sister and I stared at each other. It was so out of character for my mother to speak up like that, we were shocked. But we also were used to following orders without question, so my sister left the station where it was. There followed an awkward few moments. We were so accustomed to my mother not having an opinion, we hardly knew what to do. Then suddenly, our names were called out over the radio announcing a song to be played for us. My mother had called in and requested a song. That's why she didn't want us to change the station. I began to see what my mother's life must have been like. What must it have been like to never speak up, never voice an opinion, to have people shocked when you made a simple request. I looked at my mother with new eyes that day, and I gained a new respect for her and all that she did for us. Takahashi Nana. For context, my mother is an adorable little 50-year-old Asian lady who, despite what she says, absolutely does not look her age. She spends her free time watching soap operas, cleaning, looking up recipes on Google, and gossiping with her church friends over the phone. English not being her first language, she has an accent that didn't interfere with communication, but sounds hilarious whenever she tried to copy some famous celebrity. And here's one more thing, she never swore. Not once in my 20-something years of life. Not in English or in our native language, nada. She'd wince if she heard a swear in our native tongue. For the longest time, I refrained from swearing in our house even without her telling me because I didn't want to corrupt my delicate mother who couldn't even watch MasterChef due to her dislike of Gordon Ramsay's vocabulary. So one day, we were on the subway. I live in Boston, which is usually pretty good when it came to not being racist, but on this one day there was this fat, drunken redneck who got on. It was during rush hour, and in the middle of a crowded train, this guy started ranting about how immigrants are ruining this country and how Donald Trump is going to return America to its white supremacy blah blah blah. He was sitting right next to us, and for the most part my mother just tried to ignore him. Out of nowhere, the guy turned to the first non-white person near him, my mom, and started calling her all sorts of names. He accused her of being a Chinese spy and ripping off of our economy, and no one spoke up. This nonsense continued for about 10 minutes, and I wanted to speak up a few times, but my mom stopped me, because of reasons unknown. Finally, we got to our stop, and as it was the final stop of the train, we had a bit more time to get off, and my mom got up, stared at the guy in his face just as he accused her of not even bothering to learn English, and just casually said in her little accent, "Go back to sucking your daddy's little dick while fucking mommy's whore pussy." Dude's mouth dropped wide open. I was beyond shocked. When we left, I asked her, "Where did you learn those words?" She shrugged and replied, "Some kids at my workplace. Plus, curses aren't that different across languages." She went on to talk about bok choy prices, leaving me still shell-shocked. "If you are one of those kids at her workplace, come here, I need to tell you something and trust me, you won't like it." Andrew Mulhern. When I was in the 8th grade, I had to bring home a report card with an F on it. For Spanish. Courtesy of Mrs. X. I was a pretty good student, but I despised Mrs. X. She had the maturity of my fellow classmates and a mean streak a mile wide. She was quite popular. Her mocking of the customs and ways of various Hispanic cultures always drew laughs from my fellow 8th graders. She taught us how laughably stupid and lazy Mexicans are, for instance. She also liked to gossip about other teachers. She once insinuated that a certain English teacher who was an ex-nun was probably lesbian. I would rebel against her obnoxiousness by not doing homework and shrugging my shoulders when asked a question in class. I would aim for a 60 on all of the exams to show her I could do better if I wanted to. I showed my report card to my mother, who had to sign it. She saw A's, 1B, math, and the F. She asked me who my Spanish teacher was. I told her Mrs. X. My mother said, "She's an asshole." This is where my jaw dropped. My mother never swore. She signed the report card and handed it back to me. Then she explained. My mother was an RN at an urban hospital. She had trouble sometimes communicating with Spanish-speaking patients. She enrolled in an evening adult ed conversational Spanish course at our local high school. The teacher of the course was Mrs. X. 10 minutes into the class, my mother walked out. She thought Mrs. X was one of the most loathsome and obnoxious people she had ever met. The weird thing is that my mother seemed almost proud of my F. But she said asshole. That was the jaw-dropper. Rob Swanson. My first year of college, chemistry was kicking my butt. I came home for the weekend, pulling my hair out. Mom asked, "Can I help you?" I said, "What do you know about chemistry?" Not in a snotty way, just a perplexed way. Dad laughed and said, "She's a nurse." For the next hour, she taught me better than my professor. She blew my mind by making me see her as a person and not just mom.